boys and girls. It's Nancy A. Schenker, the Geezerproofer, back with another discussion of how to be a badass after 50, covering topics like sex, tech, and life. And as I often say, most people seem not to care as much about tech as they do about life and sex. So that's what I've been focusing on. And if you ever have any ideas for a podcast guest or an episode, or you'd like to be a guest, please reach out to me at thegeezerproofer@gmail.com. So my last episode that I recorded was about matchmaking, and we've done a couple on how to find the quote unquote love of your life. And today we're going to be talking about if you found that love of your life, or maybe wasn't quite the love of your life, but close enough, and then it's not working out, what comes after? So as they call it, it's gray divorce. The number of gray divorces in our country is skyrocketing. And we're not really sure why that is, although we have some theories on it. And today's guest is a really special person to me. She's a longtime friend and confidant. In fact, when I was going through my own gray divorce, I often went to her for moral support and advice, although I do have to stress that although she is an attorney, today's episode should not be considered legal advice. Consult your own attorney or your accountant or some combination of advisors for specific information about your situation. And as I like to say, the purpose of this podcast is to really help you be a beezer, somebody who be in the moment, be relevant, be bold, be curious, and not be a geezer. And you could be a geezer at any age. It's not unique to people over 50. So without further ado, welcome, Helene. Great to see you. And super excited to cover this topic today. So you are a matrimonial attorney. Tell people a little bit about your background, what you do, who you serve.
I'm a New York State matrimonial lawyer. We limited our practice to matrimonial, which includes all family law, divorce, child custody, support, alimony or maintenance, prenuptial agreements, and adoptions, and anything else that is included in family law. And the family law area, matrimonial, really exploded right when COVID started, and everybody can understand that. It was a very difficult time. And so all matrimonial lawyers are extraordinarily busy because even though COVID started, it has not stopped.
Well, and go into that a little bit more. Why do you think COVID accelerated divorces?
COVID accelerated divorces because people thought that they were going to die. And what they said was, if in fact I'm not happy and I may die, and many people thought that, I'm not going to stay in a relationship in which I'm not happy. Now, some people were unhappy for some period of time. Some people were unhappy during COVID. And some people just wanted a change because, again, they really thought that their life could be ending. And they weren't going to be in a relationship in which they were not happy. But it really hit the masses. It hit everybody. And there were there were many little videos on YouTube where a gentleman was asked, do you want to stay in the same place with your wife during COVID, or B says, no, I don't want A, before you could even get to B. So people were thrown together. And people did not like that. And again, because they were not happy, they said, we're going to make a change. And as I said, it spanned socioeconomic, whether you had no money or hundreds of millions of dollars, whether you were educated, whether you were a policeman, or whether you were a cardiac surgeon. It hit everybody.
And from your experience, and obviously you don't see every single couple that's splitting up, but is it men who are initiating it? Is it women? Is it 50-50? How does that shake out?
We found that it was really 50-50. there were no more men than there were women in the divorce, and who really exacerbates the divorce. It really turned out to be who was most unhappy. That's the person who initiated. Now, couples who have some kind of communication spoke with each other, and then they both knew that they were unhappy. Sometimes they agreed, and sometimes they didn't agree. And in most great divorces, people don't usually agree. One party is usually unhappy, and the other party maybe looks aside, lets them do whatever they want. And then at some point, the party who's unhappy doesn't want to stay in the marriage, notwithstanding what their partner does or doesn't do. And that's what we found with great divorces.
Yeah, I've also, read that now that women have more economic independence, they're less afraid to get out of a marriage that's not working because many of them took care of themselves financially before the marriage, and they're confident that they'll be able to take care of themselves after. So I think that socioeconomically things have shifted, whereas I think women were much more inclined in the 1950s and 60s to stay in unhappy marriages. Plus, it was societal norms. Like people said, oh, well, I'm marrying this person for better, for worse, and good times and bad times. And even if they hated each other, they still stayed together out of guilt, out of just religion, for whatever reason. And I don't think that exists anymore, especially, and you're going to love this topic as I segue into the next one, which is celebrity divorces. Well,
I want to make a little joke. I wasn't practicing in 1950 or 60, so I really can't speak to that. However, we represent many, many professional women. I represent a number of female surgeons, doctors, lawyers, and as you said, because now women are more educated and professional, they have the kind of resources that they may not have had in the 50s or the 60s. But again, we represent extremely successful women as well as men.
So the whole celebrity thing, every time you open up a celebrity website, you read about celebrity couples who are splitting up. So what, some of Helene's favorite stories of do's and don'ts of celebrity divorces that you've seen and that you just look at and say, man, if I were representing that person, I would have counseled them not to do that.
Well, there are two divorces that come to mind. The first one where I would say, don't do it this way, is a divorce between Jason Sudeikis and Olivia Wilde.
I knew you were going to say that.
And it's called the messy custody battle. And I feel that in family law that people should speak with each other, and it should not be a warlike atmosphere. And the more that people communicate, especially when children are involved, the better it will be for the entire family. So Jason Sudeikis was obviously very upset that Olivia Wilde was fooling around with Harry Styles. And so what he did was he served her in the middle of an award show. So she's on the stage in CinemaCom, and someone walks up to the stage, hands her an envelope, and as she's reading award names, she opens up the custody lawsuit, which I think is despicable. And I'm sure that she was completely thrown off. And there's video of this, which is awful. In addition, there was a big discussion about whether or not with a child, you have to litigate in their home state. Was their home state California, or was the home state New York? And of course, Olivia Wilde said it was California. And of course, Jason said it was New York. It turned out to be California, but he did all kinds of difficult, problematic things in New York. He knew that she didn't know about a court date. They didn't tell her, so she didn't show up. Things like that. There was no cooperation, and as far as I'm concerned, no professionalism. Anyway, that's something that I totally would never do. With regard to amicable divorces, I think the best example is Gisele Bündchen and Tom Brady. They had a prenup, which we can discuss as well. There were friendly terms, no public humiliation. They focused on their children's well-being. They went public, filed, and the marriage was dissolved in a couple of days. Now, they were smart because they had a prenup. but they took it upon themselves not to make themselves a spectacle. And again, I think Olivia Wilde and Jason Sudeikis are not only causing problems for their children, but for themselves and moving forward.
And how do you feel about prenups? In what situations are they necessary?
Well, we're doing a tremendous amount of prenups now, and so I feel strongly about it. I think if you have no money, you really don't need to do a prenup. And I say no money, more than $1 million, I would suggest you have a prenup. And what happens is the parties enter into a marriage, and it's a good idea to decide the issues in advance. If you split up, what did you have before the marriage, and what are you going to do with your assets during the marriage? The law in New York is that what you have before the marriage is yours, and that's called separate property. However, if you don't have a prenup, if that started at $1 million and by the time you divorce it's $5 million, your husband or wife would share in the $4 million, not in the initial $1 million. If you have a prenup, then they probably wouldn't share in any of it. Am I making myself clear?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then as well, marital property is anything that's earned during the marriage. So I have a situation now where someone is marrying a woman who's going to be a partner in a big law firm, and all of her income, and partners in big law firms in New York could make $1 million to $5 million a year, and he doesn't have that kind of job, and so New York law states that all your income after you're married is marital income, and she said, I don't want that to be. I'll contribute my portion of the marital expenses, but my income is mine, because she knows that she can be a much higher earner than him. And I represent the husband, but she was a very smart cookie about that. And we know that talking about women and their assets, that's what she decided, and it was a very smart move to make.
Yeah, I think especially after 50, it does get complicated, especially when you get into your 60s and 70s, because there also very often are adult kids involved, and who's going to inherit the money. And, if a couple moves in together after the age of 60 and one gets sick, which is much more likely as you get older, the finances can get very, very complicated. So I think especially in second marriages or third marriages or fourth marriages, there are people who just never seem to be able to stop. And those are the people who probably should think about protecting themselves the most so that they don't wind up destitute at 95.
Second marriages, and as you said, third or fourth, anything after first marriage, you must have a prenup. Because as you said, there are more issues, but you hit on all of them. Of course, Nancy, you're brilliant. One of the issues that we're dealing with now in our prenup is that the woman who is the money party, the way New York refers to people is the person who has the money is the money party. And in our case, the woman, again, is the money party. And she has long-term care health insurance, and the husband-to-be, the fiancé, does not. So we talked about this extensively, about that he has to use all of his assets prior to her going into her assets if he's sick, and then she can decide what she wants to do, because she could always divorce him if that's the case. And of course, I'm in love, and I don't want to do that. But nevertheless, that's a big issue if you don't have long-term health insurance. And one party does and one party doesn't.
I'm actually reading Crystal Hefner's autobiography. I know how it ends. It ends with him dying, but I don't know how it ends as far as how she carries on economically, because, it's such an interesting story to read of how she was 26 and he was 86 when he died. And you're reading it and you're thinking, oy, I hope she protected herself, not just from STIs, but also financially, because it's really kind of a sad story of how she found herself in the mansion. She had her 15 minutes of fame. And then I didn't realize that no spoilers, but I didn't realize that she dated Dr. Phil's son for a while. She ran off right before she got married, and then she and Hef reconciled. But I don't want to go off on that tangent, but it actually is kind of relevant also, because I do see a lot of older men after they get divorced being attracted to much younger women and they wind up with kids and they wind up with child support. I mean, look at what's going on with Al Pacino, who is having to pay a huge sum of child support because he knocked up some young woman. And maybe they're in love, maybe they're not, but, she's set for life, as is the child. Not psychologically necessarily, but financially.
We do have a number of cases where we have very wealthy men who are not only dating younger women, but sometimes working women. There was a time when it seemed that working women were intentionally getting knocked up by wealthy men.
You mean like hookers?
Yes.
We could say that on the show. It's okay.
Okay, well, like hookers.
This is a potty mouth show. Yes.
Right, like prostitutes. I actually was called by a prostitute.
Interesting.
And she said that I intentionally got pregnant with this guy, and he has a lot of money. And then he and his wife, he reconciled with it. Well, I don't know if he was ever divorced. He and his wife then took the child.
Whoa. Whoa. Yes. You can't make this shit up.
This was my key to having support for the rest of my life. And now they took the child. I didn't take the case, but it was one of the very interesting cases. And I have other cases where wealthy men have children with hookers. And I explain that if you have a child, you're responsible for that child, no matter who you have it with, and you need to be careful. I have many, many famous, I obviously can't give details, famous both in actresses, sports, the military, where this all happens. And I get calls, and I have to explain this mainly happens, the men call, that they are responsible for that child, whether it was a one-night stand, whether the woman said, well, and I don't know how graphic you want me to be, this time, please don't wear a condom and come in me. And I'm going, what did you expect? I mean, seriously, someone extremely high in the armed services. What did you expect? He calls and he says to me, I have a general portray situation. I said, unless your girlfriend is giving you a blowjob under the table, it's not a portray situation. And as I said, that level. And we worked it out. But yes, he had to pay child support for the rest of his life. And unfortunately, but when he tells me that story, I said, what could you have possibly expected?
Well, he was thinking with the wrong head, as they say.
Well, but it happens so often. And then there's the hooker who takes infertility drugs, to intentionally get pregnant. And then there's a hooker that I told you about who called me, which was really a wild and bizarre story. But it happens more than you can possibly imagine.
You have to get some of these hookers to come on my podcast. Then my listenership will go through the roof. It'll be Nancy and the hookers talk about life after 50. Would be a juicy one.
Unfortunately, they're on the other side, but I may be able to arrange that because I have them on the stand usually. I'm cross-examining them in court many times because they are happy with their support. They're not happy with their support. But it happens very, very often with successful, smart, very wealthy men with hookers, and it's a little specialty of mine.
And Helene Brick Cabot, lawyer to the hookers, or lawyer to the Johns, right?
Right, lawyers to the Papa Bears.
I know. I could see a TV ad like the personal injury attorneys. So you've obviously built a very, very successful practice, and I know you outside of work, so I know that you're a great mother and a great grandmother and a great person, and you have fun. Does this kind of work ever get under your skin, or you're able to really separate your domestic law life from your own personal life?
Well, first of all, thank you for your kind words. And if you speak to my children, they do not think I can separate it. And I have little things all over that they bought me, mom, boss, and I try not to use my litigator face, but it's very tough to really separate it. I really don't think I was jaded. You also know that I was married for 35 plus years to an older man. And it was very successful, and I was very, very happy until the day that he died. And so that certainly hasn't jaded me. But whether or not I can carry on in my normal life with my family without being impacted by this is probably not true. It probably impacts me.
No, and I'll even say, as a personal friend of yours, there are times when you go into lawyer mode, and I always value when you give me advice because, people have to kind of, and that's one of the things we were talking about, you have to balance out your heart and your head and your wallet when you're making decisions, especially when it comes to gray divorce and gray remarriage. I remember meeting a guy once who told me that he had married a woman, they bought a beautiful big house together. He gave her pretty much an unlimited budget to redecorate, and then discovered that she was banging the pool boy and was basically embezzling from him, like beyond the home decorating, had taken him for a couple $100,000s. And, some of it really just boils down to common sense and, knowing the signs when you see them, especially after a late life divorce, because you may want love and companionship so badly that and we were talking about this last night. I was interviewing a matchmaker, and we were talking, and a couple of my guests have talked about that, is not ignoring the red flags or the pink flags. When you're young, in your 20s, and you're madly in love, you've got good excuses. But when you're in your 50s or 60s, you should be thinking with the right head and with your bank account sometimes, as unromantic as that may be.
I find that many people who see me do not see the signs. And they're very, very evident many, many times. The other thing about prenups is I find that people, many, many couples, don't discuss finances. And it's unbelievably important. When I say to couples, so do you know what your spouse earns? Did you ever see a tax return? No. How could you possibly get married to somebody, plan to spend the rest of your life together, in which you have an economic partnership without knowing the details? So prenups are very, very important for first marriages because it forces this discussion between the parties. And many times they're shocked and surprised.
I would love to find out, and this, I'm going to go to this topic, the Golden Bachelor. He just signed with a major talent agency. So he clearly is looking at this opportunity as a way to become a TV star. He was I think he was at the Grammys. He's been popping up everywhere. He now has an agent. And you don't really hear a lot about what Teresa's up to. So, there was a lot of speculation at the beginning. Are they going to have a prenup? Aren't they going to have a prenup? I would love to know what's going on behind the scenes there.
I really don't know what's going on the scenes there. And I know that you and I felt differently about it. I love the program. And it showed older women 50 plus could really have a chance to find love again, whether it was scripted or not, because in this instance, she was found to be beautiful, sexy, loved, and taken care of. And it provided hope, which I think is what people have to have. Whether it is a prenup, I don't know, but we can discuss the Trump prenup. Oh. The gossip among the matrimonial lawyers in New York, and I cannot vouch for the truth of any of this. It's just gossip, pure gossip, that the reason that she didn't move to Washington the first time when he became president until June was because she renegotiated a prenup. And several times thereafter, every time he wanted something, she would renegotiate for more. And I truly believe that's true. I cannot vouch for the accuracy of what I'm saying, but Melania Trump is certainly taking advantage of her best interests. And that is one of the reasons, again, that she didn't move to Washington. Forget about, her son. It was that she's renegotiating her prenup, and it happened a few different times. He wants to run again. He wanted her to be a part of it. And you see that they go into negotiation, and she's a part of it. She didn't leave because I'm sure that that's a part of the prenup as well.
Right. Very interesting.
You wanted to talk about great divorces. So why do people get divorced at age 60? So most of the time it's because they're unhappy. However, I looked at our caseload, and we have, I would say, a third of the caseload are divorces over 60, and that's a huge, huge number. So as I said, some people are unhappy. However, There are other reasons that I want to bring to people's attention, which may be one-offs, but there's at least 5 of them. I have a husband who decided to transition to become a woman. And that's the reason that they're getting divorced at 6. I had 2 of them, by the way. Both.
Yeah, I actually had a matchmaker on the show who specializes in LGBTQ matchmaking. And we talked about that, people coming out after 50. And she actually gave some really good advice of, if you're thinking of maybe switching to the other team, like how to go about it in a way that is responsible. So there's a whole interesting topic there because, again, back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, people didn't really talk as much about their sexual orientation. So they didn't really have an opportunity to come out, or they were very closeted. And now we're just living in a very different world.
But as I said, I have 2. It's very interesting. Very interesting. And the women are very successful professionals. And the men both came out, and both women decided that they no longer wanted to stay married. I know the one that I'm very involved in, the man definitely wanted to stay married to his wife, but she said that this was, not a situation that she could live with. Second situation, another very wealthy couple. The husband had a severe health issue with his heart. Just out of the blue, something happened. And he wakes up one day after he had allegedly a very happy marriage, no issues, and says, I no longer want the country club life. I no longer want the possessions. And he walked out after like 30 years. He gave his wife half of everything. He was extremely generous, but she was devastated having this perfect life. And again, I think that was a life. It was a life-threatening disease, and he just decided he wanted a different kind of life. Then I have 2 cases where the men are mentally unstable. People are married 25 or 30 years, and then they say that their husbands just lost it. One decided that their child of 30 years was really not their child. And it was bizarre, but I'm going through this right now. Another one, I'm trying to think. Another one, I'm trying to think of where he was unstable. I'm trying to think of the other example, which I can't think of. The other thing is affairs. Some marriages can survive affairs, and some marriages can't. Now, it's a symptom of someone being unhappy, but the affairs are the acute, and when I say acute, the absolute closest reason to why they are getting divorced. And again, this happens to women as well as men. I don't want people to think that men are the only one having affairs, because
no, the statistics.
We have many women.
Yeah, I was just looking at the statistics. It's pretty evenly balanced these days, men and women, and as you said, some relationships can survive it and get through it and come out on the other side and be even stronger than ever. And this was actually one of the topics with the matchmaker, who believes that having an affair represents a fundamental character flaw. But I think that there's no absolute when it comes to that. I think sometimes people make mistakes. I think there's situations. I think sometimes when there are drugs or alcohol involved, judgment is marred. Anyway, I don't think any 2 affairs are exactly alike, or the process for getting over them necessarily. But I do understand why some couples may say, sorry, that was a breach of trust. There was no healing from that. There's no getting back from that. Let's just move on.
We have marriage counselors that we send people to see if they can try to survive it. Sometimes they can, sometimes they can't. But it's not necessarily a reason why I would say people who are married 30 years should get divorced. They need to explore it and see whether or not someone could get past it. And what the marriage counselor told me is the party who did not have the affair had to be able to get past it. And some of the people can, and some of the people can't, as you said, it being a breach of trust. Now, why do people stay in unhappy marriages for 25 and 30 years? Well, of course, they wait until the children grow up, but that's only 20 years. Why do they stay 30 years, 35 years? Well, many people are too lazy to change the status quo. They just say, inertia, I'll just live with it. Other people are too concerned about the financial impact, and I know you and I have discussed that. whoever the non-moneyed party is afraid that they're going to lose their, we call it wife style or husband style. And they just don't want to divide their assets. Someone might have to move out of the marital residence, or it may have to be sold, or even the effect that it would have on grown children, because some grown children take sides. And those are all reasons why people might not move out. And again, you asked about whether it's a husband or a wife. I really think it's even these days about who really is the moving party, the one who's just really unhappy.
Yeah, and life is too short to be miserable. So thank you, Helene. This has been great. If somebody is over 50 and has had enough or is contemplating getting divorced, obviously you work only in New York, and our listeners are from all over the country, if not the world. But what is your website?
I would rather not give a website, because we really don't like taking people from a website, and I might want to say a word about that. Matrimonial law is very emotional, and it could be very problematic, and we choose and select our clients very carefully, and we prefer to have a referral-based practice. As I said to you, we represent famous people as well as, many cops, but we represent many famous people, wealthy people, and we would rather have a referral-based practice. We could certainly, give out my information any way you would like to post it, but I would prefer it not to be online.
No, that's totally fair. So, reach out to me. Again, it's thegeezerproofer@gmail.com. And if you'd like to get in touch with Helene for any reason, I will pre-screen people before I send them your way, which is kind of the way we've worked anyway over the years, where we'll bring each other prospective clients or connections. And that's how Helene and I met many years ago. I was living in the same neighborhood that Helene lives in, and a mutual friend said, there's this woman who's very smart and very fun and to hang out with, and doesn't know a whole lot of people because she works all the time like you do. And that's how Helene and we met cute many, many, many years ago, and have stayed friends to this day, even though she's in New York and I'm in sunny Arizona, but I do go back to visit often.
I would also like to say, Nancy, that I really feel at this point in my career, where I've been very successful, I like to give back. So I don't mind talking to people. If, people would like to discuss a problem, we do consults, and it's my pleasure to really do them, because some people just need some guidance, and it's a way to really sometimes just straighten out your thinking. So I really don't mind people calling and just asking about things.
Oh, well, that's very sweet of you. Thank you, Helene. That's great.
Anyway, Nancy, thank you for this opportunity and all the kind words you had to say. I love doing this, and I also write, as you are aware of, for a national publication, and it's not only fun, but I think what you're doing is fantastic. And I will say a word that if anyone has not seen Nancy's stand-up comedy, I think it's one of the best things that I've seen in a very long time.
For those of you who have not heard of it, I've done a stand-up routine twice now, and I'm going to be doing more bookings. I just need to wait till my day job workload gets a little lighter. But it was called "I'm Not Your Fucking Grandma," and it's basically about the perceptions that society and the media have of women of a certain age. So, if and when, I know, as you said, we have very different views on this, if the Golden Bachelor ever turns into the Golden Divorce, I have every confidence, Helene, that you will be representing one of those two parties. And we would love to hear what goes on behind the scenes there. So you can listen to this podcast on Spotify, Apple, pretty much anywhere you get your podcasts. The video of the podcast is also available on both Vimeo and YouTube, so you could see our smiling faces. And again, if you want to be a guest, or you know of somebody who would make a great guest who can talk about life, sex, and tech, or all three after 50, just reach out to me. And follow me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever your poison is. My handle is The On Switch. And I also have a Facebook group called The Geezerproofer, where I post my new episodes and people are free to post their own thoughts and ramblings about life after 50. So thanks so much, Helene. And really enjoyed having you as a guest. And until next time, remember, be a beezer, not a geezer, no matter how old you are. Peace out.